You're listening to the Slavic Literature Pod, your shelf help guide to all things Slavic.
I'm Cameron Milana.
And I'm Matt Gerasimovich.
And today we are covering Part 1, Chapter 7 of Vasily Grossman's life and fate, shifting our attention over from the Nazi prison camps over to Battlefront Stalingrad. Not the name of this book, but, the topic, the actual war, which the book Stalingrad that Vasily Grossman also wrote did not cover, despite being titled Stalingrad.
It was kind of a bit of a rug pull on that one.
Yeah. Maybe the greatest rug pull of his life.
I think it was a rug pull because they had to change the title in the U.S. edition, I assume, or the English edition probably, so that it could appeal to like the military World War II history buff dads. And then they actually had to read a really quite detailed analysis about things leading to the battle and then not display it.
Well, I think as I recall, we named Stalingrad, but when there was backlash against it in the publishing stage, they changed it to For a Just Cause. The gist of the backlash is basically, what right have you to write, a book called Stalingrad, which of course he was there. So he kind of had every right. He was there for months, but he was not particularly in favor at that point in time. But the book was quite popular initially. I don't know. I can't say this for certain, but the suggestion is that Stalin personally didn't like it. And that tamped down a lot of the initial excitement and led to kind of a wave of backlash against him. Since there are a lot of people who are initial supporters who very quickly turn around to write critical articles. But we did talk about that actually in our Stalingrad series. If you want to hear about that, I won't link the exact episode because I don't remember. And
just those numbers. We won't link it. You have to find it. It's in one of 10 episodes. You search.
Yeah, anyway, so is there anywhere you want to start today?
Yes, I did. There is I kind of wanted to start towards the end, but I'll kind of work my way there a little bit because this is kind of the waiting around chapter.
Right.
It's an interesting one in the sense that when you're reading a book about a war, you think that they're going to focus on the high action, the battles, triumphs, things like that. But Grossman instead, at least here in this part, is electing to show us that sort of anxious moment before, where at any moment fighting could break out, but it's not at this moment. And so the soldiers that are kind of have lost communication with the rest of the troops, they kind of can't let themselves sit still. They're always kind of trying to stay busy doing something just so that there is not that, I don't know, that silence. Maybe so you're not thinking about it. There's any number of legitimate reasons, right? But what kind of struck me was the contrast between what I would say are the sort of artificial noises of the war room, the war effort, the people copying dispatches, the motors humming, the orders being tapped out in Morse code. There's, I don't know, typewriters, whatever there is going on. And then right at the end of the chapter, it's talking about kind of burying the dead for their eternal rest on the first line of their eternal rest. And they're kind of just sharing the space next to their comrades that are shaving, eating bread, drinking tea. But you have this really sort of sad, solemn silence, but not completely, not yet. It will be eventually, but right now you just have this almost artificial hum of, the sort of war effort. And it's kind of just I don't know, it's a sad and very solemn image that's kind of composed here.
Yeah, for sure. It's a tough one. I mean, I know it's tough to come here from the camps and also, but right. I mean, every level starting from the officers who are cut off from their troops, they're on the opposite bank. Stalingrad itself is the terms to know here. If you read our daily post, you know that the left bank is where the reserves are. That's the side aside from Stalingrad, your artillery reserves, whatever, and the right bank is where the actual fighting is. So these commanders are separated from their troops. And that's something that I made this point in our Discord today, and Matt's already pushed back on it, so he can provide a succinct rebuttal. He's already planned it, but from my view, right, we know, at least I think as Robert Chandler mentioned to us, Grossman has wrote at some point that the only book he could read during the war was War and Peace, and you can see, I think, a lot of philosophical continuations modified from War and Peace and Stalingrad, and I'm possibly here. I'm not going to die on this hill that this is what Grossman meant when he was writing this chapter, but the officers being cut off from the troops may possibly a continuation of of Tolstoy's kind of argumentation for how we think about our generals and our officer class are the ones who direct battles, when in reality it's actually just the moment to moment personal decisions being driven by every individual soldier, which basically decide the outcome. Whereas these officers are giving orders cut off and not really knowing what's going on, and minutes or hours behind truly understanding the battle. Now, this has to be kind of created because the problems that Tolstoy is describing are kind of solved by radio to some degree, but are then recreated by the fact that radio is cut off here. And for sure, when you're reading Grossman's work, I think in a lot of ways you'll see someone like I think reflecting Tolstoy's worldview, but also modulated through the fact that Grossman had a lot more, I will say, firsthand experience of life in general, and how a lot of these things work that Tolstoy didn't exactly have. So he kind of provides like a similar argumentation, but usually tamped down quite a bit, and how broad reaching they are to be a lot more specific, and I would assume a lot more pulled from his own experiences.
Yeah, I think the way the generals are depicted are not quite as ridiculous as Tolstoy depicted them in War and Peace. I think that they're pretty, I don't know, they seem very sort of realistic to me. I would say, there's not as much room between the officer class and the rest of the army. They're kind of all, I don't know, they're all doing the same like mundane tasks throughout this. They're not sitting there trying to plan their grand counteroffensive right now. They're just, they're shaving, they're repairing their cigarette lighters. They're just doing this kind of very small, minute things that almost don't seem to be in the same, like they almost seem like they shouldn't be in this book. Yeah. Seems like why is this a detail that you felt was so important to include? But clearly, he does, because these are the things that he notices. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, with so many war books, I'm thinking specifically here of Viktor Nekrasov's book, Frontline Stalingrad, when you're talking about the battles, tends to be with like frontline soldiers or focusing on the war parts more so. Nekrasov's example, I mean, he's not only talking about the war, he also has quiet moments of waiting, but a large part, it's kind of like driven by moment to moment, like, okay, what are we going to do here? Where are we going? What's our job? Or are we waiting for orders? It's a bit more, maybe a bit less prosaic, right? I mean, in Frontline Stalingrad, for example, and earlier in the book, they're in Stalingrad waiting for orders, but they're still like hanging out with pretty girls and doing all these things. And Grossman here in the front, even in the front line, even so close to combat, some of the most intense combat of the war, you still have officers going through true tedium, truly nothing to do without anyone to give orders to a degree. I'm not certain I've really seen another highlighted as much in other war fiction, although I would say like the broad point of war is whatever, 5 minutes of chilling excitement, and then hours or days of tedium is maybe not the most incisive point to a modern reader. But I would say at this point in time, if you look at similar novels, or especially the fiction I read about the war written from that own time period, definitely something to pay attention to.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually did have Frontline Stalingrad marked on the start of this chapter. I was thinking kind of along the same lines as well.
Yeah. So if you're looking for even another book to read on top of everything else Grossman has wrote, you should go read Viktor Nekrasov's Frontline Stalingrad.
Yeah, well, good luck finding it, though. It was difficult to get translated.
Yeah. I the copy I have is old, and I feel bad for treating it as badly as I have. It's gotten knocked out of my bag. I might have it in my bag actually right now, not because I planned this, just because it's been in there for so long. But anyway, there you go.
He stays on brand.
Is there anything else you wanted to cover for this episode?
No, I'm good on this one. I just wanted to make a quick note on the pacing of the novel. Just pay attention to it, because it's going to start to do some things. We had short, kind of consistent chapters, and now we're going to get to some really, next one will be really short, and then we're going to start lengthening, and just you'll see as we continue to go through this how Grossman kind of deliberately plays with the pace.
Absolutely. Well, excited to get to that. But for now, you will hear from us again tomorrow.